This is the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show, sponsored by your North Texas Chevy dealers. Together, let's drive.
Welcome into the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show. Mike Leslie, Andrew Cely, back with you once again. I have a bit of bad news for you. We are only like 52% of the way through the Dallas Cowboys season. There's still a lot of meat left on this bone, and what else is there to talk about at this point?
Well, again, luckily we still have some games to sort some things out, because I think the big question that I at least have with this team, maybe we can get into a little bit later, is who's sticking around? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Aside from the big,
that's a big question.
The big players like Dak and CD, who we know are going to stay in, potentially Micah, but that contract's still lingering. We'll figure that out too. Either way, we got a lot to get to, so let's get right into it with what's on the show.
Here's What's on the Show, sponsored by NFM.
The Cowboys are preparing for Monday night's showdown against the Houston Texans. Am I overhyping it just a little bit by saying it's Monday Night Football? Maybe. But we'll see how Dallas can make this competitive this time against one of the beasts in the AFC. And it's the return of the top five, this time on the heels of the Mike Tyson-Jake Paul fight over the weekend. We take a look at the top five sports gimmick exhibitions that were actually successful. That's what's on the show. Mike, now who's on the show?
Wait a second, that wasn't a gimmick?
No,
not
a chance.
No, not at all. Kind of dovetailing into exactly what I was saying. We're having a hard time getting people to want to talk about the Dallas Cowboys. All we got is Mac Engel today. Mac, God bless you for being here tonight and helping us round out the show. Nobody wants to talk about this team, and for good reason. What do you make of tomorrow night's Monday Night Football showdown with the Texans? How bad is this going to be?
So the worst game between the Cowboys and Texans I can ever recall was the first game the Texans ever played. And I don't think you were here, Mike. I think you weren't.
I was like
now that
14.
I think about it.
I was 10.
So that was the worst one, because the Cowboys under Dave Campo were the heavy favorites to play an expansion team in Houston's first ever game. And Houston, with David Carr as the quarterback, kicked their butt. So as bad as tomorrow night could be, right? Let's say they just go Lions on the Cowboys tomorrow night and turn it into 52-6, or even worse, TCU in the national championship game and pull a 65-7 out of their hat. I don't think it can be any worse than Houston winning its first ever football game as the Texans over the Cowboys.
I remember that game well, because what I remember more than anything else was it took David Carr and that expansion Texans team like a minute and 34 seconds or whatever to drive right down the field and score a touchdown to open the football game. And it was like, what is happening? That was a bad era of Cowboys football, and we're living through one right now. What do you think of what tomorrow night's going to look like? You seem to be a skosh more optimistic.
I'll at least be optimistic in the sense that this Texans team still hasn't really shown us who they really are yet. I mean, this is a team that a couple weeks ago played down to the Jets of all teams. And I have been actually pro-Jets, at least for a little bit, for the part of the season. You can't lose to the Colts like you just did today and expect to get anything positive from me out of it. So this is a team that looks lost on offense occasionally, even though their quarterback has been one of the more dynamic guys in the league since he's been in here. And the defense has been remarkably good. But if this thing is even close to low scoring, that's going to favor the Cowboys, at least in some level. Like, hey, maybe they can just piece together 2 drives and score 14 points. I know that's asking a lot. I'm just saying this Texans offense can turn the ball over regularly. Like, there are ways to hit this team. And at least if you're battling for the state on some level, there's got to be some kind of pride in that. Mike, what did you think?
Dude, how much do these guys really care about that?
That's a good question.
Like, I think Overshone made a comment last week that makes me think that he cares about that. I don't know that the whole roster, like, a lot of these guys aren't from Texas. Like, Overshone's from ARP. He played at UT. Like, there's a hook there. So for him, he has vocalized the fact that he cares. And, hey, they're still little brother. And we may be having a down year, but we're still big brother. And, like, that's just another reason for Cowboys fans to love DeMarvion Overshone. He's clearly a terrific football player, and also just kind of has to go full Spencer Dinwiddie on you. The vibes are immaculate with DeMarvion Overshone. I like this kid, but I don't know that permeates the whole roster. Right. Like, I mean, And I'm sure Micah Parsons wants to go out and win on Sunday night, but does Micah Parsons from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, really care about the Cowboys-Texans rivalry other than the fact that, hey, he plays for the Cowboys, so he wants to win? I don't know that it goes much beyond that.
I agree on some level. Mac, I'm curious because from the Texans' perspective, I'm sure they look at it like that because they've approached this game, at least the last couple of times that they've squared off. It's felt like the energy comes from their sideline more often. This is also a Texans franchise that walked out to a playoff game with varsity jackets on. So we know that there's a difference in how they approach things. And I'm just curious from your perspective, there's no real interstate rivalry from both sides, but do you feel like there's anything from the Texans here?
No, maybe a little bit, but no, I think that's one of those things from a bygone era in sports where we were able to translate high school and college-like rivalries into the professional level because it existed, because there was real roster retention in the offseason, because free agency wasn't as pervasive, or it didn't even really exist back in the 70s and 80s. And that's player movement has changed all of it. They're all good friends. Nobody wants to see anybody get hurt. No one's trying to put anybody in a casket and all that stuff. It's just changed now. I mean, think about it when Washington plays Dallas. There's no animosity there the way there once was. And certainly the only thing that exists now between Houston and Dallas is all from Houston's level, because Houston, as good as they look at times this season, we talk about bad franchises. We talk about horrible NFL teams. Houston is in the discussion. And I'm talking about even, this goes back to the Oilers. This is a franchise, either side, either Oilers or Texans, they've never been to a Super Bowl. And I can't remember the last time they've been to an AFC championship game. This was way back, I think, in the 70s. Warren Moon and Jerry Glanville never even got there. And as bad as the Cowboys look, and as average as they have been over 20 plus years, there's still a layer of bad that exists beneath them. And the Texans have been in that discussion along with the Browns, Jaguars, and a couple other teams. So I think from any type of rivalry about, oh, we got something to prove, it is purely from Houston, and I think it is more amongst their citizens than their players or coaches.
Yes, there has always seemed to be, and this is coming from somebody who, yes, I've worked in Dallas now for the last 10 years, but before I got the job here at WFA, I had never set foot in Texas in my life. So take this with a grain of salt that it's not coming from somebody that's super biased in this conversation. There's probably a smidge because now I do have a decade of my life here, but it's always felt like, even from when I first got here, that there's been this little brother syndrome for Houston as it relates to Dallas. They've always had this inferiority complex in comparing themselves to Dallas, and I think the Cowboys and the Oilers have a lot to do with that in their histories, but it's always kind of felt that way, and I think it's why they latched on so hard to the Astros, and I think it's why last fall hurt so much for them.
Yeah, and you're talking little brother. San Antonio feels that way. Austin feels that way. All of the four major markets kind of look at the DFW area in general and just, they're looking up. I mean, there's no other way to put it, but that's the way that this thing goes on some level. Like, it runs through Dallas, and Dallas is worried about everyone else except for the people in state. Which is
Clip this and run this on KHOU tomorrow morning, and let's see how that goes. More of the ultimate Dallas sports show after this.
Today's headlines, sponsored by your North Texas Chevy dealers.
Down go the Chiefs. The Bills knock off Kansas City 30-21 in Buffalo, ending the two-time defending champs' unbeaten streak this season. The Chiefs are now 9-1, and the 72 Dolphins are popping champagne. And the Dallas Wings win the WNBA lottery. They will have the top pick in this year's draft, which means more than likely college superstar Paige Beckers will join Arike Ogunbowale in Dallas.
Welcome back to the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show. Mike, we kind of mentioned it in the first block, but we don't really expect the Cowboys to win this game on Monday night. So my question to you here is, what counts as a win, and who are the players we should be looking at to think, hey, they performed well, that's a positive sign for this franchise and them moving forward?
Listen, Mac's point in the first block carries a lot of weight here. This is not the Lions that they're playing. They're not. If it looks 52-6 like the Lions did to the Jaguars today,
yeah,
pack it all up and go home. The Texans are not the Lions. They're a good football team, though, and this Cowboys team against a good football team doesn't bode well. Frankly, I'm surprised that the spread is only 7 points, which is a pretty big spread in the NFL, but I don't know if I'm supposed to give betting advice on this show or not, but bet the Texans.
I'm already hearing Sean in my ear saying, no, stop it, cut it out, cut it out. Mac, I'm curious.
Do we have a dump button?
Exactly. Mac, I'm curious. What do you think, what are you most going to be looking for? Is there a certain player you're interested to see? Is there a matchup you're even interested in at this point?
I'm really curious to see if they can get pressure on C.J. Stroud. I mean, everybody loved C.J. Stroud last year, and I thought it was a little too much too soon. He's really good. But I think from a Cowboys perspective, this is about player development, and this is about contracts for guys. So Micah Parsons last week made a difference. And if you go back, I don't know why you would, but if you watch that first half against Philadelphia last week, the defense got stops. The offense did nothing. So I think if you're looking at players, if you're looking at signs of saying, okay, who's developing, who can kind of salvage some of this in terms of player development, Overshawn has looked terrific. If he stays healthy, that looks like a big-time player. Trayvon Diggs has not looked like the same guy since he suffered the ACL injury September of last year. He needs to be right because they're not going to dump him, but he's got to be better than he's been. Mike, I know you guys are starting to, we'll see our Christmas cards here pretty soon. Jalen Tolbert.
I was just going to say.
I did think the interception last week was pretty impressive.
But I'm just glad. I'm just glad you went on that tangent and not him. All right, Mac opened the door this time. Mac opened the door this time. Go ahead.
Said nothing.
Keep going.
Rico Dowdle. I don't think I think finally the Cowboys acknowledged that the Zeke Elliott thing was just a waste of time, and I still can't believe that they did it, but okay, they've given up on that. And now, at least with Dowdle, you can say, okay, we have a professional running back here who can help us in the future. Is he a number one? No, but he's something who has shown if you give him some time, he can be something for you. Jake Ferguson, I think he needs to be a little bit better than he's been. We had high hopes for him. Certainly CeeDee Lamb, but the other guys, the rookies, Tyler Guyton, what do you have in him? He needs to show that he can do a little bit more. I know he's had some injury stuff. Cooper Beebe at center. I don't know what's going to happen to Zach Martin. So when I'm looking at some of these guys, is who are the young players and are they progressing? It looks like to me they have completely white flagged second-round pick Luke Schoonmaker from last year. He's barely playing. And then the other one was Mozzie Smith. He's a first-round guy. I'm not exactly, as good as he looked against the Giants, and he did. He looked terrific against the Giants, but I think everybody knows that was sort of an outlier. And can they salvage him? So when you look at this game, you're like, okay, who can play? It's those individuals and say, are you making a positive step? Can you be something for this team in 25?
I can talk my way into believing and projecting a return to competition for this franchise next year because there is still a lot of talent, as you just kind of outlined. Say what you will about Dak Prescott, and I think he's been one of the biggest disappointments of this particular football season, despite the injury that he's now dealing with and the fact that he's done for the season. Prior to that, I thought he was very disappointing this year, coming off of finishing second in the MVP voting last year. But he did finish second in the MVP voting last year. You've got a quarterback that you at least know you can play with, you can win with. I don't know that you can win with him on the highest level, but you can win with him. You've got Dak Prescott, you've got CeeDee Lamb, you've got somebody that you need to see more out of in Jake Ferguson, but a decent tight end in Jake Ferguson. You've got Micah Parsons, you've got Overshown, you've got Trayvon Diggs, you've got Deron Bland, who they need to get healthy, although at this point with this season, kind of whatever. But looking big picture 2025 and beyond, there's still talent here. There's still pieces here of a team that did win 12 games 3 consecutive years. If this team ends up going 4-13 or whatever and gets a top 10 pick, gets 3 top 80 picks in the draft, and you're able to replenish that offensive line, you're able to plug a couple of other key pieces in here with what they should hope anyway is a really good draft. That's something they've been good at over the course of the last decade and a half or so. You can see it from here, how they could spin this thing back up pretty quickly, but it's hard to look at anything that's left of this season and see any value in anything other than just, all right, show us something with these young guys. Other than that, what's left?
I think that's my biggest fear in this is that this team is essentially going to run into a lot of bad habits down this stretch. And if this happens again, like if they hit another slide next year or something, let's say they start 3-3 and they're kind of in the mix again and they lose 2 straight, do they revert? That's kind of the question, because especially with young players, if you set the table like this, it can linger a little bit. And we saw a bit of a taste of that in the Mike Tyson-Jake Paul fight, with Mike biting on his gloves throughout the fight, in a way, in a bad habit that lingered literally decades later. And that is a segue, because when we come back, we are talking about the top 5 sports gimmicks that were actually successful. Stay with us in the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show.
And now it's time for the top 5, sponsored by the Fort Worth Convention and Visitors Bureau.
Welcome back to the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show. Time now for the top 5. And yes, the high school football playoffs are underway, but everyone on Friday night had their sights set on Jerry World and the debacle that was the Mike Tyson-Jake Paul fight. So in honor of those kinds of high-profile matchups, we're looking at the top 5 most interesting exhibition matches of all time. And we'll start in the ring here with number 5, Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather, MMA versus traditional boxing. Unlike Tyson and Paul, these two at least brought energy to the match, and Floyd was uncharacteristically aggressive, which we could have used a lot more of the other night. McGregor fighting outside of his comfort zone, hang tough for 10 rounds before a TKO. Mac, we'll start with you. Did you get what you wanted out of this match specifically?
Yeah, I did. I watched that one, and I was impressed because McGregor, you could tell McGregor was trying, and he pushed Mayweather to fight. Even if Floyd probably carried him the last couple of rounds, that was a gimmick event that I thought, that's not bad. So if somebody paid X amount of dollars for that one, and I can't remember what I paid, I thought, yeah, that one's not half bad. For a clown show, that one's okay.
At number 4, we head to the golf course, and I know Joe's already saying it should have been number 1 already. The match, Tiger versus Phil, which started as a relatively lighthearted, made-for-TV event, turned into a hyper-competitive match on the back 9, and it went 22 holes before Phil finally prevailed. Now it's an annual thing with different participants. Mike, what do you think about this one?
This was the original. This one was fun. Some of the things that have spawned out of it afterward have been pretty hokey, but that one was a lot of fun. And it was just something that if you were a golf fan, you were itching for that kind of drama between those two. And we didn't see a whole lot of it organically present itself on the course in a major or in big time events. So we kind of had to manufacture it, but even though it was manufactured, it was fun.
I think the reason why this one isn't higher up on the list is because people had trouble watching it, which is another thing that still has not changed over about 5 or 6 years that we've been doing these live streams. All right, on to number 3. This one's a little more recent. Steph versus Sabrina in the NBA three-point contest. Started as a curiosity, but it absolutely lived up to the hype. Sabrina moved back to the NBA line and shot the best of any competitor in the actual event before Steph came in and edged her just a tad. Pressure was on, a modern-day battle of sexes, and both delivered. Mac, what'd you think here?
Loved it. Absolutely loved it. It was the best part of the All-Star weekend. Yeah. I stayed with that telecast until I got to see that, and that was the best one. That's the best one. I'm sure. I know you've got other two, but that's the best one. I hope they do it again with Paige Bookers or anybody else. Certainly Caitlin Clark. That thing was awesome. Bring it back. In fact, they should just make it guys versus girls, because I would watch that.
Absolutely. All right, at number 2, we head to the tennis courts for the Battle of the Surfaces. When there was a real debate between Federer and Nadal as the best in the world, they set up an exhibition match in 2007, Nadal on clay on one side of the court and Federer on grass on the other. Again, an oddity turned into a spectacle, both players adjusting to their specialties, and Nadal took this one in 2-1 sets after a lengthy tiebreaker in the final set. Mike, your thoughts here?
I don't remember it. I'm kind of intrigued to go find it because that does sound cool. I was a freshman in college. Apparently, I was doing other things. I do not remember this one. I'll have to go look it up.
Nadal famously said before the match he thought the whole thing was going to be a disaster because literally they were having trouble growing the grass on the other side of the court. And yet, again, because both of these guys are the best that's ever played, aside from obviously Djokovic, it turned into something much bigger than that. So I think on some level, the curiosity of something as wild as clay versus grass turning into a good match, that's the reason why I put it number 2. And at number 1, I alluded to it earlier, it's the Battle of the Sexes, one of the most meaningful matches in world history. Billie Jean King versus Bobby Riggs. King won the match in straight sets. This is technically a second match of the Battle of the Sexes. Riggs won the first one, but King kind of set the record straight. She hit outright winners on 68% of her shots. A landmark moment. Mac, what'd you think?
Certainly from a civil rights and a gender advancement perspective, it did everything. It exceeded any expectation, for sure. But Bobby Riggs Putty Riggs was an old guy. He wasn't a very great pro. And he was playing the best player in the world, and he got his butt kicked. And he was doing it for a bag of cash, which he got. But in terms of like a great competition, no. But in terms of legitimizing women as great players in sports, 100%.
It was an iconic moment that you and I were both born 20 some odd years after it, and everybody knows about that moment. It was a huge,
Thanks,
iconic
Mike.
moment in sports. You're welcome, Mac.
Appreciate that. I was waiting for that. I like how you asked me that. Thanks a lot. You want to ask about Babe Ruth or the Civil War?
Mac Engel, what was it like? Never mind. Mac Engel, thank you so much for being
joining
here.
us. You were great, Mac. We always appreciate it. Stay with us. Mike's Final Take's up next. Welcome back to the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show. Time now for Mike's Final Take.
Did you hear Kirk Herbstreit just bagging on the Cowboys the other day in a college football broadcast? They teed up Monday Night Football, Cowboys, Texans, got to tune in for Monday Night Football. And he says, hey, keep putting them in these primetime windows. They're a mess. He's right. And it makes me wonder, are we finally going to see a moment? I think it happened in 2020, the Dak Prescott broken ankle season 2, where they actually flexed the Cowboys out of a primetime window, because that's how bad this football team is. Go watch the Stars. They're really good. They're fun. Go do that. Spend your time with that, because this train wreck ain't worth it.
There's plenty of interesting storylines. Anyway, thank you so much for watching the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show. We will see you guys next week.
This has been the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show, sponsored by your North Texas Chevy dealers. Together, let's drive.